Hey everybody, welcome back to Andertons TV. I've got Earl Slick over today. I'm very, very honoured for you to come down. I know you've been in the UK for a little while doing some teaching and some recording and stuff, but it's the first time we've met. And I'm excited to meet a real kind of rock and roll legend. And I think with all these kind of interviews, it's great to start, I think, at where you first, like what are your first recollections about seeing somebody with an electric guitar and thinking, man, that is cool. I should do that.
I mean, I'm a Beatle age guy, right? So it was see the Beatles on a Sullivan TV show, you know, because they were already on the charts in the States.
Yeah.
But maybe the Beatlemania thing was kind of an undercurrent, but when that happened, all hell broke loose. And then the next day in school, everybody was in a band. Nobody had it. We didn't have a guitar. We had nothing. Nobody played anything. All of a sudden, and within 6 months, we all had gear. You know, I started off with the Beatles got it going, but then I saw the Stones, and that was it. That's when the guitar part bit me in the ass heavy. Because with the Beatles, I was playing a bit, but when the Stones started, that's when I was digging in. Because that hit me to the blues. I was already very familiar with Chuck Berry from here, on the radio as a kid. And Elvis, you know, with James Burton and all that shit. I remember that. But it was the Stones because something about Keith's Chuck Berry bit and then Brian Jones with the slide bit. So remember we had an LP and you could read, look at these credits again. And I'm seeing other names on there besides the Stones. Morganfield, I just figured out, Willie Dixon and Howlin' Wolf and all that. So I started buying their records. And that's when I started to do, learning that stuff and the Stones stuff. And then it went really electric with Hendrix and Cream and all that stuff came in. So, you know what I mean? I'm a hybrid of that whole thing of all those guys.
What a melting pot that sort of, mid to late 60s was for the electric guitar. Kind of feels like, I always sort of think nowadays, that period for me feels like it should have been longer. Like things evolved so much over like 5 or 6 years.
It happened so fast. If you think about, let's take the Beatles for instance, from the first, let's say early '64, George was doing Carl Perkins and all that kind of a thing, and then by a couple of albums in, he was using fuzz tones and weird sounds, and then Clapton and then Keith started using fuzz tones, and it did go fast. Yeah, it happened really quick.
You half of me has to sort of think to myself, I can't believe that Cream were doing their thing, like late 60s, and you're sort of sitting there going, wow, that's it. Like I said, nowadays it feels like music would take 20 years to evolve that much.
A lot of this is socio-political shit, because in the 1950s in the United States, it was a really weird time where it was the McCarthy era where everybody looked the same. You know what I mean? It was that thing. Then Elvis comes along, Little Richard comes along, Chuck Berry comes along, and all of a sudden it opens up all these doors, right? Then the British invasion happens, and then I think every amp and guitar company in the world went, holy shit, this is a gold mine. And that's when you saw all the innovations on the amps, the guitars, all that started to happen.
Yeah, that was 64. I don't think it's any coincidence whatsoever. That was the year my grandfather and father started this business.
Wow.
And as you rightly say, the demand for electric guitar and to be in a band went from pretty niche to like everybody wanted to do it.
Right, and also if you got a situation where you hear Satisfaction on the radio and you don't know what that sound is. Not long after that, now you got Hendrix is using the fuzz face. What was the twisty pedal? The Univibe.
Yeah.
Univibe, right? And the wah-wah pedal, right? And it happened really quick.
So you're growing up in upstate New York, right?
At that time, no.
Oh, okay.
No, I grew up in Brooklyn until I was about 13.
Yeah.
And it moved to Staten Island, the borough from hell.
Right.
But that's where I was at the age, that's where I learned.
Yeah, but that scene must have been pretty buzzing at that
time.
It
was, because there were so many clubs to play at, and they actually paid you money, right? And you could start, let's say, January, and we would do a week in each club, sometimes 2 weeks, and you'd start at this end of Staten Island, and then by the time you got all the way through, you'd be about halfway through the year, then you go back to the first place and do it again. And then it got better, and all of a sudden you're playing in Brooklyn, you're playing in the city of Manhattan, you're doing all this stuff. And that happened, it happened fast.
Yeah.
From the first gig I did at a club until Bowie was only 6 years.
Wow. Are you self-taught, or do you remember getting lessons when you were a kid, or as in on the guitar? Just did you listen to records and teach yourself to play?
Yeah, I taught myself to play.
Yeah, so no lessons. How do you think that? Do you think that gave you a different kind of sound or personality to guitar players that maybe had gone through a more formal?
Yeah, it did a few things. The way I feel about it, I'm glad it worked out that way. Now, had it turned out that I was going to be like a full-blown session player, did all the sessions, you had to read. I couldn't do any of that. I didn't want to do any of that. And by listening to the records and copying what I could copy, because I must have destroyed half my albums because I would hear the lick. So I kept putting the needle back and forth, right, to learn a lick. And instead of being in a structured environment to learn guitar, whatever hit my fancy, I'd buy the record, I'd learn the essence of it. I still think I cannot copy other people's solos. I can't even replicate most of my own solos from records I've done. There's a few that I do, okay, that I have to. The one thing that I'm kind of happy to hear, they say when they hear me, they know it's me.
Right.
Wasn't my intention, but that's what happened. I think that's because I listened to like so many guitar players over a period of 3 or 4 years that it all kind of flooded my brain, and then it all morphed into something that turned into kind of what I do.
I guess you're kind of known as almost the Sideman, so someone who's made a very distinct decision throughout their career to be the guitar player in someone else's band rather than, I know you have solo albums, but you're quite open about that not necessarily being a big driving need for you to do. What is it that you think people have seen in you as a guitar player that has, we can go back to the original David Bowie gigs, but he'd be the first like big famous.
Big. Yeah, I've done some stuff before, but not like that.
Yeah.
Not like that.
So what does he see then, he or his producer or whatever, what do they see in you then that you think all of those ingredients about being self-taught, having your own sound, what do they see that you think means that, or is it personality? I mean, what's the...
I think it's everything. Yeah. I think it's personality and me as a person, a lot of personality and how I approach my guitar. I learned from the street, so it was rough around the edges for sure. And my rhythm guitar playing probably had a lot to do with it because I prefer to do that. I could play rhythm all night and not play any solos and be quite happy. I think they saw the energy in that, whatever it was. I mean, sometimes I can sort of logically think about what it is. Sometimes I go, I don't really know what to see. But it's a vibe thing. It's really what it is. It's an attitude. We should probably go into that because there aren't, I think most people who play the guitar have some ego or whatever that, that's what appealed to them about the instrument. You want to be there standing, doing the solo. You're, I think, quite comfortable with this idea that actually rhythm guitar, Sideman, that's the gig that you loved the most. So it wasn't the intention.
Right,
okay. Because I was like everybody else at the time. I had my own bands. First we did the cover band thing. That's right. See, that's the one thing I found as time went on, and it probably started with the millennial kids, that I ain't playing that guy's music. I'm going to play my own music. Well, I learned how to play my own music by stealing shit from those guys, learning from them, which I think helped. And I have my own bands. Matter of fact, when David brought me in his band, I was an inch away from being signed with my band to Columbia Records.
Okay.
And I made a decision at the time, which in hindsight was the right one. First of all, I didn't even know if the word Sideman didn't even exist back then. But one thing I did do in my band that I had, the bands I had, especially the last band I had, was that I always made sure that whatever was going on with me and the other guitarist and the drummer and the bass player was fucking together so that the singer didn't have to look back. Plus, I didn't want snarls from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I already had the mentality. Because people will go to me, well, you play with this guy and that guy, and you should be a solo artist, you should be as famous. I'm not comfortable with it. I'm very comfortable being that guy that's there to cover the bases.
Yeah.
You know, I enjoy that. I like it.
Who do you look up to in terms of people who have similarly found that role? I always think of players like Malcolm Young as just like the great unsung hero in that band. But like you take him out of that band and it's just not the same band. But do you look at other players?
It's hard to look at. It's hard. I know what you're talking about. It's hard for me to see that as much in a self-contained band. I'll accept a few exceptions. Steve Cropper.
Right, of course.
All right. Now, I did a documentary for BBC a few years back,
seen
right?
it.
And when we were doing it, we were looking for Sideman people.
Yeah.
I said, you got to get Steve Cropper. I said, I don't care if you're going to kidnap him, you got to get him. Because up until Steve, you played on the record, and then other guys played live. The studio guys didn't want to go on the road.
Right.
You know, and vice versa. And Otis Redding just wouldn't have it. He made Steve go. You know, even though Booker T and the MGs was a band on its own before, it was Steve Cropper to me is the first official sideman by definition, where he's the same guy that played on the records, the same guy that plays it live.
Yeah.
That's how I looked at it. Even Ronnie Wood, who's been in the Stones, you know, for such a long time, he was always a great sideman, and he is and he isn't one.
Yeah.
And so is Keith.
Yeah.
Really. If you look at Keith, you watch the Rolling Stones, God bless poor Charlie, gone, but you look at all the clips. A lot of times, if Keith ain't got something going on up front, he's right in the back with the drummer. You know, first with Charlie, now with Steve, and keeping that whole thing going. So that Jagger ain't got to do shit to look back. He knows that it's all covered. Ronnie does the same thing. I mean, Ronnie's wonderful, you know, as a guitarist. You know, those are the kind of guys.
Your comment about the sort of the guys who perhaps in the past would have been either a session guy or a live guy. Do you have a preference between, you know, touring versus recording, or is there joys in both, or?
I enjoy them both, but if you stick me on a tour bus, I'll just keep going until it runs out of gas, you know.
That's the thing, is it? And that must be just the buzz of playing to a live audience.
It's a lot of things. It's continuity, it's structure, it's family. Those are your boys. That's your family, you know. And then, of course, there's the buzz of the shows. You know, it's all that together. You know, I'm referred to as a session player, which is a really inaccurate term for me. Sideman is absolutely accurate. I could never really be a session player. Steve Lukather probably is the best session player ever born, because Steve can do something none of them can do. If Steve they say, okay, Steve, we're doing a blues record. Right, goes in. Sounds like a real blues player. We're doing a jazz record. Sounds like a jazz player. Not like he's faking it. Like if I try to do stuff that's out of what my norm is, I sound like I'm faking it, and so I don't do them. And I can't read. You know, it doesn't help. But yeah, Lukather is the best at that. You know, it's something that I never was good at it.
I mean, you obviously did do quite a few, you know, records with David Bowie, you know, and then some more with John Lennon, Yoko Ono after that. It was always the draw of doing shows with those guys and touring with those guys that drew you in, and then they asked you to play on the record, or was it the other way around?
With Bowie, it was tour first, record later. John, the tour never happened.
Right, of course.
But that was the touring bit. I actually have the posters that were made up for the tour that had never been public, and I've got one. I've got a JPEG. I have never printed it out. It would have been both with them. Yeah, as well as it was with Bowie. But it just opposite. Bowie just happened to be, Mick had quit the band, and then David went to do Diamond Dog's record, and I came in to tour on that record. And then I stayed to do albums. With John, we did Double Fantasy and Milk and Honey, and then the tour was booked, and I would have stayed on for that.
I'm always fascinated in the sort of, and I think it's harder now than ever for a musician like yourself to try and make a living out of this, because, but you know, back in the day, if you were playing on records and the records were hits, you'd have some residuals from those that would keep paying you, you know, long after you'd finished the recording. The touring thing is very much you're getting paid while you're working, not while you're not. How have you, through your career, made sure that you can pay the bills there? Is it just, you just have to work?
Sometimes you just get your ass kicked, period. You know, it depends on what you do, who you're touring with, how long you're touring. If it's a one-off tour, a year, maybe a month, or whether, you know, it's a long-term thing, they're all different. But there's always that fucking dead spot in there. It depends also where you were living. You know, I mean, I lived in Los Angeles for a while. In New York, I spent a lot of time in London. And also, times are different. I mean, there was so many recording studios in Los Angeles that in between stuff, you know, I'd be in there doing a session with somebody, or, you know, a friend of mine, hey, you want to play a couple tracks on the record? Great. And I'd be having a coffee or something. Some guy and say, hey, you know what, we're in Studio B. What are you doing? I'm playing this record. Can you come in and do a couple solos? This would happen. Or just like, I've actually had people come up to me in music stores. A guy in another band, oh, how you doing? Good to see you. You know, we're doing a record, you know? I don't if you see that anymore, you know, sometimes I was broke as a joke. Sometimes we look at a bank account and go, holy shit, it's a lot of zeros. You know, the way I've always done my money is that whatever's in the bank today, doesn't matter what, I'm not sure what I'm making, you know, over the next year. Okay, there's X amount in the bank. This is what it costs me to live every month. I take what's in the bank, I divide it by the month, and they go, you have 8 months to live. After that, you're f***ed. So something better happen in the next 8 months. That's how I do it.
Yeah.
I still do. I have to.
A lot of players that I've met in your position just live by the sort of mantra of just say yes to everything. Is that a necessity? Can you ever really afford to say no to something?
No, I can't, but sometimes I do, and I'm doing it more lately than ever. I mean, back in the day, I used to say yes a lot because a lot of it was right in what I did anyway. It was, you know, it was something that I was comfortable with. But, you know, after David passed away, we did the remainder of the band, and with some guest singers, we did some touring for a couple of years. But then everybody wants me to go and do these Bowie show things. And it's a rare occasion when I'll sit in with somebody on a Bowie song now. Or they'll pay me to do it. It's like...
It just doesn't feel right to
I tell you what, I can be bought, but you don't have enough money yet. Show me the zeros, and sure, I'm more than willing to embarrass myself for enough money, you know? But that doesn't happen, you know, so it's never a worry.
You're not the first guitar player that I've met who's played with a super high profile but now deceased artist. There is a certain, I think people do feel slightly embarrassed about doing those kind of tribute shows. Like it's not...
I hate them now.
Yeah.
I hate them.
Yeah.
Don't like doing them.
And that's not that they're bad shows, but it's I guess you've been in the real one, right?
But they ain't right.
Yeah.
Okay, when we did it, we did the one that we did in 18 and 19. We had all the right guys. We had Bernard Fowler from the Rolling Stones taking care of most of the leads with some guest stars. Fucking great. It was great. It was the guys, you know. But you could do, after a while, you could do that just so long, you know. And as time goes on, that audience is going to get smaller anyway. Well, I was never comfortable with the buy the ticket for $500 to meet the band at soundcheck bullshit. I hated that. I don't like it. It's bad enough when, like, let's say the remainder of the Bowie band, right, would do it. But when they see bands that are worth, like, stupid-ass giant money, and it's like, why would you charge some fucking kid $1,000 just to come back when you're worth $80 billion?
We could talk about your career and experiences and stuff like that, but there are other interviews out there that I've seen you do where they talk about that. But we're a gear channel, so I'm kind of interested in the gear journey of, and again, what you started on, you know, what you were playing when you first met David, what the demands were of different artists that you've played with over the years in terms of, you know, did that shape the gear that you were turning up with? I loved what you said before we started rolling, which very much about you've got to be moving air and all that kind of stuff. I think that'll be interesting to get there. But let's go back then. So we're in sort of, you know, I don't know what, early to mid 70s. What's Earl's rig? You know, what are you out there playing? And did you have to change that much when you got the first Bowie tour?
I didn't have to change anything with David, not one thing. I walked in there with the only electric guitar I owned, which was a 1965 Gibson SG Junior.
Cool.
MXR, phase 45 pedal, and a 1969 100-watt Marshall stack. That was all I owned. And that was the whole tour. That was it.
Really? So even for some of the Bowie stuff, which I guess would have had some, what's the right word? You know, I mean, there were some interesting sounds on all of his albums, but you were just happy, you just recreated those sounds using fingers and an amp.
So on the Diamond Dogs tour, when I got the gig, I mean, I love Mick Ronson as not only as a guitarist and an arranger, but just all the great things he did. But we became friends, and the only thing I was worried about when I got the gig was that the fans were going to hate me, because he's the original guitar player. Okay, I'm kind of looked at that like that sometimes because I was right there at the beginning.
Yeah.
But Mick was really the first guy, and okay, me and Mick do play similar, but there's all these signature licks, and I really suck at that. And I asked him about it, and he said, do what you do. That's why I hired you. Do what you do. So I didn't have to sit there and duplicate all that stuff, thank God. And some of the weird shit, like Moon Age Daydream, there's that dreamy. Mm-hmm. The sound guys did that when they mixed it. I didn't have any echo things on stage.
Right, okay.
Then later touring things did change a bit. I was using more. The last couple of tours we did, I used more pedals than I ever did with David. But by that time, from 1974 to the early 2000s, there was a lot of records made that had a lot of different sounds. So, I mean, I didn't have a spaceship like that, but it was about half that size, and for me, that's huge. I had 2 different echoes, for instance, 2 different delays, because when we would do Heroes, that I had 2 delays going at the same time, so they would bounce off of each other. Then I had one kind of fuzz tone for one song. Then there was a few things I used a flanger on, but there wasn't much on the board at all. Jerry Leonard on those reality tour and stuff, he handled all the electronic stuff. He could do the loops, and that was his gig.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
This SG that you've got, it's a single pickup SG, right? Just, okay, and a Marshall Super Lead, a Plexi
At
Super
the time, I'd met a guy named Larry DiMarzio who used to fix my guitars.
Yeah.
And he started to make pickups in his basement. And I have those pictures you see of my SG from then with the 2 pickups. Those are some original DiMarzios. So we cut up my SG65, which I just had restored, by the way, back to the single Dog Ear P90.
Right, okay. Yeah. Tell me about guitar players from, particularly young guitar players today who will be going, the idea of, plugging into a 100-watt Marshall Super Lead, just playing at that volume with those kinds of sounds will be so alien to them. What did you like about an amp like that?
The same thing I still do. I like to play loud as hell. I want to feel it.
Just the volume, the
hell
excitement.
Yeah.
And how did that shape your? Because I often find with my experiences of playing with a 100-watt, especially when I was younger, was it made me afraid, because I was like, wow, if I do something wrong here,
they're gonna hear it.
There's nowhere to hide.
Well, that's why with the advent of all the pedals and stuff like that, and humbucker pickups, you can get away with shit. At that right there, a Telecaster, Stratocaster, especially Tellies, is one of the most unforgiving guitars you can play. You screw up on that, they're gonna hear it a mile away. And so I learned on an acoustic. I learned on a Dan Electro convertible. It looks like a Dan Electro, but it's got a little baby sound hole, and it had no pickup. So it was a starter model. So your dad would get you that for $30, and if you got good, you could buy this kit, and you would just kind of like plug the pickup in, right? I never got that far because I traded it in to get my Telecaster. And as far as playing through amps and that volume and stuff, the one I played the other day, all it was loud. It was brash, it wasn't warm. So I took this little Fender and I put it through a 4x12, and
I think the amp that you're talking about that you said you thought was brash was a JCM 800. So
exactly what it was.
Much more preamp gain.
And even at that, I thought, okay, I got to get some warmth out of it. So I kicked the gain all the way up, and I turned the master down. I hated the amp. I'm sorry, Marshall. Oh my God, I got prison Marshall. We may have to do something about that.
No, honestly, I think the beauty with, if you look at that evolution of Marshall amplifiers, 100%, if you go from JTM through to the Plexi stuff.
I love Plexis.
It's a rawness. There's not a lot of preamp volume. There's a lot of power amp overdrive in there, which is different harmonics. And then different players, I think, if you look in the 80s, as the playing style became a little bit faster and lighter, they would just adapt. Those higher gain amplifiers became the right thing for that kind of player.
Yeah.
But you're just from a generation that likes a different kind of amplifier.
Yeah.
I suppose things like this appeal.
Yeah. I've got like those studio series of the Marshalls are great.
Yeah.
I forgot. I don't even know the code names of my own guitars. I'm horrible at this stuff. It's a 20 or 25 morning amp. You can kick it down to 5 watts.
Yeah.
It's got 110 in it, right?
Yeah.
It's basically a 25 watt or 20 watt plexi. It's really what it is.
Yeah.
So when I'm recording, I bypass the speaker.
Yeah.
I'll go into a 2x12.
Yeah.
And I jump the channels. It's got like the old school.
It's
got
that one. It's that one there. We've got the head. You've got the combo, right? So the very top one.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the 20 watt plexi.
So you just
Absolutely.
jump the channel. You jump from 1 to 2.
Yeah.
So you get that nice treble you want for your other one, and then you just blend in the other guy to get a little bit more balls and some bottom end.
I'm in that sort of section of Bowie fans that probably liked the music. My favourite Bowie stuff was his least favourite stuff that he ever did. So I was all about the Let's Dance album and that kind of era of sort of 80s Bowie stuff. And I know you were back touring again with David after that. But that's a very different guitar sound, those albums, to the 70s sort of Mick Ronson kind of stuff. How did your gear change for that, or didn't it? Again, it's all still you?
It didn't.
You being you.
It didn't.
I love that.
It didn't. No. Well, if you take Serious Moonlight Tour, for instance, Carlos had all that Nile Rodgers stuff down.
Right.
We didn't do the whole album live, but we did. I mean, that was a 3-hour show, so we did a lot of stuff on that tour. So basically, I held down the rock and roll end. Carlos held down his R&B bit with the pedal board and the sounds. I was just there to kind of be the Keith guy, the rock and roll guy. That's what was there. So it wasn't expected of me to be like, the digital sound machine pedal guy.
So when did the gear, was there a point where perhaps, I don't know, just the size of the clubs dictated that you couldn't be taking 100 watt heads? Or
I did anyway. I did anyway.
You're every sound man's nightmare, aren't you?
Totally. They hate me. You know what, though? The last few years, I have been, okay, David Johansen, one of my best buddies, he just passed away. And I did the Last Dolls tour. I was a guitar player in 2011. And I used 4 orange AD30s, each one with a 2x12 cabinet, all at the same time. All 4 heads were on, all 4 cabinets were on. I loved it.
I bet it sounded great.
It sounded amazing. Talk about pushing some air, man. So yeah, I still love doing that stuff,
Realistically, though, what size venue are you realistically able to are you playing sort of theatres to 3,000-4,000?
Those were 5,000 to 20,000 seats.
So you're still...
And some outdoor venues, because part of it was in the summer. They bitched anyway. It didn't matter whether you were out. The soundman always bitched.
But so I guess at that size venue, it's very much a personal thing on stage. The audience is still hearing front of house, or most of the audience is still hearing front of house. Yeah. I don't think there's anything better than a guitar at a volume where it's a visceral feeling, right? Your body is, if I'm hearing guitar through little studio monitors like that, it's just not the same excitement. But how does it make you... Do you think you could play with a smile on your face just through studio monitors, or would you just do the, if it's the job to be done, it would be done?
No, when we record, I'm overdubbing. I'm always in the control room anyway. As long as I got my amps mic'd, everything sounds right. But I do have them push those monitors.
So you still want it loud?
I want to still feel that, So if I'm listening back to a mix and I'm overdubbing, I'm hearing. I always make them, drum heavy. I get this, feeling, it kind of...
What happens to your playing if you don't have the volume?
I make them turn it up, that's all.
But can you define, do you just not feel as inspired, or is it a tonal thing? How can you define why you want it loud?
It's the volume gives you the juice you get on stage, that's all it is. So if we're listening back and I'm doing an overdub, You guys got the volume down. I'm like, come on, man. I got to feel this. That's what it is. It's feeling it coming back at me.
Yeah.
So it gives like a live feeling, even inside a recording studio.
I did want to talk about the Slick guitar thing, but I'm still kind of, because the Slick guitar thing has several different shapes of guitar within the range. So are these all based on guitars that you've had in your life and had a particular affinity to, or are they just popular shapes, or what's the...
I've probably used every shape and owned every shape of one of these at one point or another, right? Pickup wise, a lot of that has to do with the kind of pickups, you know. And then there's some too that Sideman, who owns the company, which is a Guitar Fetish, which is where I'm part of, you know, that he realizes that, you know, we got to make some of them here that are, you know, a little bit more stock, but you know. Like there's a line of Slick pickups that are wound a certain slightly different way, you know. Tellies, like, you know, we did make some tellies with a Gibson wraparound bridge, and the reason I wanted those too is because I like to play slide. Good luck trying to readjust these. They're a pain in the ass, you know. The Gibson's the best. You just, you know, that. I probably most of my career I've had Strats and tellies in my hands. You know, which is why we have a lot of them.
What's your favorite Strat and your favorite telly in your collection? Or is that like asking who are your favorite kids?
It's kind of that, and it also depends when you ask me.
Right.
Right? You know, like whatever I've been picking up, you know, like right now, this week, because this one I leave this in London all the time. So I have it here. And when I come here, it turns out it's kind of, because it's in my hands, you know. Right now I got a few different ones at home. You know, I've got a real early Slick telly with the Gibson bridge thing on it that I just played a bunch of great slide on a record. That thing sounds great for that. I got the Fender, I think it's Wildwood. It's a custom shop. It weighs 5 pounds. Oh, I got a Brad Paisley Esquire. Sam has had a good guitar, and it's got the old V-shaped neck. Yeah. You know, the old school telly necks.
Another single pickup guitar. You're obviously a fan of the simplicity.
Oh, you know what though? No, they hid a guitar under the pickguard.
It's got the stealth pickup,
which I don't use that much because it really. I need to have somebody needs to cut that and bring that pickup up. I'm not getting what I want out of it.
Right.
But the bridge pickups, it sounds like something out of the 50s. It's great. And my acoustics, you know, I'm always picking up an acoustic. I mean, my old J45, the Gibson L1, the little baby body one like that. Also have a Gypsy Jazz, like a Django Reinhardt. I can't play that stuff, but that sounds great for blues, that guitar. Yeah. I don't really have a lot of guitars with humbuckers in them anymore.
Just don't need them, or?
I don't tend to gravitate towards them lately. But most of my career, when I look at it, I did have Les Paul periods, but if I look at the big picture, usually single coil pickups, P90s, Strat and Telly pickups.
Yeah. So as well as the guitars in the Slick range, which again we'll put a link below, you can go and find out about these. You've done a couple of pedals, I think, as well with the same guy. Is that right?
I did this one pedal. I forgot that he called it, the name he called it, I can't even pronounce, but it's an Earl Slick. It's an octave fuzz pedal.
Oh, it's a great sound.
With a gate.
Okay.
And the fuzz is like nasty. It's great. Real, you know, because fuzz and overdrive are not the same thing. Some people don't understand that. Yeah. I look at fuzz tone the way I look at it on a delay pedal. It's an effect. I like to use the octave fuzz, you know, or just even though my amps aren't overdriven, a fuzz pedal is just going to make just too much of a racket to control sometimes. So I had to put a gate in it, and it's controllable. I can either pull the gate out completely, or if I engage the gate, I can control how much of it I want to use. Yeah. It makes it a lot easier to deal with. Actually, I used it on this record yesterday.
And that's still predominant. So you're just happiest with guitar, fuzz pedal, amp.
Yeah. Okay. When we did, when it was right before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of gigs. Me and Glen Matlock were touring all over here, and I did have a delay that also Daredevil made. It's a great little delay, right? Yeah. Because some of the stuff we were doing was a little bit borderline rockabilly shit, so I wanted that. So basically, I had my fuzz tone, and I had that. That was it. You know, I had a pedal board with 2 pedals on it.
How did you meet Glen? And you know, what's that? Because that's a bit of a departure from. Actually, I say that. I'm assuming that Glen is still doing pistol stuff, right? Is it?
Oh, they're out there now, yeah.
Yeah. So that's quite a departure from playing.
It's not as much as you think.
Really?
Glen is a Beatle fan.
Okay.
And the guy who used to sing in that band was not. And, you know, there was a rub. Even though Glen wrote just about almost all the music for that Nevermind the Bollocks record, he's a good songwriter, you know. So I got a message from a guy named Keenan Duffy, who's a British clothing designer.
Right.
And also was involved with Malcolm McLaren and all that stuff going back then. He's a very well-known clothing designer now. And he's still doing music. He just put out another record. And he said, you know what, why don't we write a couple things to go play? I said, okay. So we did, and then he knew Glen Matlock, and we were all in New York. And I booked a studio called Clubhouse Studios in Rhinebeck, New York, which I use all the time. And we went in there, and then we got Clem Burke, Blondie, another of my buddies that just passed away. And we called it Slinky Vagabond, and we did some gigs, we did some recording, and then everybody just got busy doing all kinds of shit, and we didn't keep it together. So that's where the Glen Matlock thing came in.
Right.
So I met Glen through Keenan in 2007, and then we became good mates, and we started doing, you know, we did about 2 or 3 records together. We played a lot here.
And is that a fairly regular gig for you still if you're over in the UK? Or?
I haven't been that much. Well, I have been lately, this last year again. But, you know, I was here for the first 8 months of the pandemic. I went home. And then I got sick with Lyme disease.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you know what? Upstate New York, that whole area, it's tick central. So between the pandemic and everything else, you know, Glenn started doing stuff and I started doing stuff. So now he's with the Pistols and, you know, who knows? I mean, at any minute we could be doing gigs. You know, I don't plan things ahead that much because every time I do, they don't happen anyway.
That amazed me during the pandemic, or just as the pandemic kicked in. It really exposed to me how what's the right word, vulnerable musicians like yourselves were, because so many gigs and tours were just done on like are you free, and you go yeah I can do it, no problem, and then you realize they get cancelled and you've got no contract, no nothing, and you're just, that's it, no money. I thought it would be much more, no, you know, if like signed and months in advance, but is it like that? Has it been like?
Okay, let's say for instance with Matlock, right? We'd book them as we go. We'd book like, you know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks at a time. Or if something, like I remember we did the Fuji Festival, they had called us 6 months before, that kind of stuff. But you know, the big tours, of course, they're signed, sealed, and delivered, and they have to be. I mean, you get a Bowie tour, we get 6 months notice. Right. Because they'd have to make sure we were all could do it. Then they had to put crew, they had to put, I mean, there's a lot to do. Yeah, those are like that. But, you know, no, it's not. And there's no fucking guarantee. No guarantee. It's not a guaranteed business, man. You want a guaranteed business, become a cop or something. I don't know. Or a fireman. It
would be remiss of me to sit here with you and not ask you to impart to me some sort of Sideman knowledge. What are your sort of like golden tips if I just want to be that side guy?
To be the side guy?
Yeah.
Wow. You have to have an instinct of what's going on around you, first of all. You have to be mindful of other people. You have to be able to see what's going on. And you got to realize that your name's not on the fucking marquee, and it's not going to be on the marquee, right? Which, to me, is fine. I'm great. I'm fine with that. You know, you got to know who you're working with. You know, you have to know this person. And you got to know the other people in the band. You have to be able to navigate around their personalities. You have to know where you fit in. Where's my role? You know? Am I going to be the guitar player that wants to keep standing in front of the fucking singer all night? Am I going to be the guitar player that wants to play over his vocals? Then you're out. You're gone. You play for the song. You play for the show. And if you get lucky enough, like I was, to work with the right people, they picked you for a reason. So you don't. The whole idea is that you don't want to have to be sitting there instructing everybody like they were in the first grade about, well, you got to play it this way, and you got to use this kind of amp. Like, you know, any records that I've done, especially the last few that I did, I brought all the right guys. I knew we were going to bring the right shit to the table. We didn't have to discuss anything. You know, maybe, hey, can you try that tempo a little faster? Or, wasn't like, you know, use that amp, use this guitar. I mean, look, if you bring in a sideman that you need to tell everything to, then he's probably not your guy, you know? David did make one suggestion that after we did the first batch of gigs in the early 2000s and we did the reality record, it was heavy a record. And at one point he said, you know, Slick, you don't have Les Pauls anymore. I said, I haven't been playing them because I was playing the telly. He said, you need to get a couple for this heavy. And so I got them. But you know what? We needed them. We needed them for the stuff. But that was it. It wasn't about what kind of amps to use or any of that kind of stuff. I find that if you're going to work, this is why groups break up and fight all the time, is that it usually means there's some wrong people in there. Could only be one wrong person could throw the whole thing off. But, you know, you shouldn't have to sit on top of people to get the job done. It should be natural.
I think, particularly if I'm watching a band like the Stones or something like that, I love all the visual cues that you can see from a group of musicians that know each other inside out, and Keith or Mick can just, there's a something, and the whole band just goes, all right, we're going again, or whatever. Yep. I mean, does that just become second nature?
It does. Like, especially for live, that what you learn, because I've studied some of the stuff, of my own stuff with David, after the fact, that it's almost like a choreographed ballet where I could feel when he was ready to stand back, and sometimes he'd just walk off the fucking stage and leave me there. I knew he was going to do it. Same time he knew he was going to do it without even looking at each other. I could tell. You watch us sometimes, you'll see him backing off and me coming up or vice versa, and you go, they must have, no. There wasn't even an eye signal half the time.
Wow. So it's not even a bit, you just feel it.
You feel it. You do it enough, and it also has got to be with the right guy, with the right people. But you could feel it. You could tell.
I still think that for me is, as much as I see on YouTube now, people have become insane levels of player in their bedrooms. Like they're posting stuff on YouTube.
There are some guys that I've seen on YouTube that I go, oh, maybe I need to take lessons. Holy shit. But then I'm thinking, wait a minute, what's he going to do if he has to go outside mom's basement?
Well, and that's my point, I think, is that there's still something incredibly special about a musician, doesn't matter what instrument they play, that can just go and be in a room with a group of other musicians and make songs, make music,
think about this. Technology, right? So there was a point in time where you want to hear music. Where'd you go? Local pub, local bar, local rock and roll club. It was full. There were people there every night, right? It didn't need a big act to fill the place up. That's where you went to meet the girls. That's where you went to have a couple of beers. You went to play rock and roll. You went there to misbehave. It was your whole social thing, which is now done on the internet. So how do you teach somebody who knows only that what that was like? Because then it sounds like my father telling me how great Glenn Miller was, and I'm going, no, the Rolling Stones are better. Fuck Glenn Miller. You know what I mean? It's this mentality thing. The shame I find about it, and at the risk of sounding like an old fuck, is that you get in a room with people and things happen. Magic happens in a room. How do you make that happen when you're not interacting with each other? Because depending on how hard the drummer even hits the snare drum depends how I'm going to play. If he's playing in front of the beat, behind the beat, this is a gift, but it's just, and I also think, and I know, I'll hear this from, there's a couple of very successful YouTube guys that are very good at what they do. But I hear them all talk, some of them, about how, and now all songs all suck, nobody writes songs, it's all crap. Well, you sound like your father, right? Take a 12-year-old, 16-year-old, 20-year-old. They've never heard vinyl, so to them, MP3 with earphones, guess what? If that song makes them happy, who gives a shit how that was recorded? What the hell did I know at putting a vinyl record on a thing? I wasn't playing a Clay 78, anymore. Music made me happy. And so if it makes them happy, then it's good. And if a lot of people like it, it's great. You take, you know, you have Miley Cyrus and Taylor Swift and all this. Look at the size of the crowns and stuff and the records. Oh yeah, that's just, you know, guys complain it's this crap this or it's fake country. Well, tell that to those Billies. And Billie Eilish is another one. Lady Gaga, at first, my first impression of her was, okay, here's a Madonna part 2. That woman's amazing. You get her behind the piano, she's got this one song that brings me to tears every time I hear it. She's amazing, you know. And so they're there. They're still there, you know. And now, granted, those are solo artists, which is a little different. But even at that, there's got to come a point where you got to have people in the room. You have to, you know. I mean, I can do remote albums, but I've been doing this so long, I know what to do. You know, because I mean, most of the records I do are from artists from here, even up in New York. They go, you want to play the record? Yeah, just send the files off to the studio. You know, I instinctively know. And I'll call the artist too. I'll say, okay, we got this, this, and this, and this, you know. Give me a clue. That way, I'm not absolutely clueless on the thing. He's, oh, no, do this, you know. Give me an overview, not instructions, you know. And it's easy to do. But, you know, what if you do everything? They're writing from the machine up. That's what I was trying to say before. It's not from the song. Okay, a tape recorder, a cassette recorder, a digital machine, a Pro Tools rig. All that is a medium to make a recording, a record. People, when you say record, they think of a record is... They were making records thousands. A record is something that they were writing down, and you know, on a cave wall is a record of what happened. It's right. So it's just the medium is different. One is a digital, one's analog, one's tape, one's chips. Yeah. It's how to take what you're doing and record it for history's sake, so that it's there.
I think your view of modern music is very accurate and open-minded, because you're right. If I've got 2 young kids. They love modern pop music, and that's all that matters, right? Is that somebody loves the music. I think the bit that I do slightly, and I think we agree as well, that you're desperate to not lose is just get in a room with some other people, see what happens.
But you know what? What if a guy that's just learning how to do all this stuff that's 16 years old don't float his boat? Maybe his boat is float by the...
Maybe you're right.
I know I'm right. I know I'm right.
Yeah.
Because some of them are going to be like that.
Yeah.
And so, what's the big deal? Does it mean that what they do sucks? Maybe I don't like it. Maybe it doesn't do anything for me. But, you know, when I hear music, or even when I hear an amp or something, I got to feel something in my chest. Something's got to happen. Some emotion needs to happen, whether it's a good one or a bad one. Something, I got to get something emotionally out of it. And I'm sure they do too. The medium is just different. You know, it's like wishing you had your rotary phone back.
You know,
good luck.
The world could learn a lot if everybody just took that point of view on almost everything in the world. If it's making someone happy, then
leave it the alone.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? I would like to jam out. I would like to be your sideman, if you will permit that, for this final segment. And you, I think you mentioned in a recent interview that you if someone like Buddy Guy gave you the call, you would be there like a shot. So
yeah, he liked chord. He doesn't know how to play chords.
So I will play some. Give me a key.
I don't know.
We can just go with E again, and we'll just play that.
It's fine.